All right, good Friday to you, meteorologist Joey Sovine here with an 11 o'clock in the morning update on the very latest on Hurricane Lee, a Category 4 hurricane, downgraded slightly as we are watching the storm. Once these hurricanes get to this point where they've kind of reached maturity or kind of peak in intensity, we see some fluctuations kind of back and forth, and there'll be some ebb and flow of this storm as far as the strength of it, the intensity, maybe at times over the next couple of days, Category 4 or 5 back and forth. I think this probably has not peaked its max intensity at this point in time, but it is expected to maintain a major hurricane status as we go through the upcoming days, through the weekend, and well into next week. Here's the latest look on satellite imagery, just to give you a kind of perspective of where this storm sits at this point in time. We are looking at a major hurricane, Category 4 hurricane, in fact, sitting at almost 1,900 miles off to our east and southeast. So this is a long ways out there. Thankfully, this storm, as it intensified yesterday, not close to any land area, so we don't have to worry about that in the short term. This latest advisory has winds at 155 miles per hour. Pressure has risen pretty significantly within this storm, which is an indication that the intensity or intensifying that we saw yesterday has halted, and we are starting to see the winds kind of relax just a little bit. Still an extremely dangerous storm, just 2 miles per hour away right now from being a Category 5 hurricane. So movement is off to the west and northwest. Forecast through this weekend, this storm is likely to stay out of the Caribbean, north of the Leeward Islands, north of the U.S. Virgin Islands, north of Puerto Rico, and north of the Dominican Republic. So all those things are certainly great news, especially with the intensity forecast to be maintained at roughly Category 4 strength over the next couple of days. In fact, all the way through next Wednesday. Now, these islands right here, we'll watch this. This is the Turks and Caicos and then the Bahama Islands. We are looking at that storm possibly being close by as we go towards the middle of next week. Let me show you the latest computer models, kind of break things down as far as what we expect. These latest models all kind of bunched up. This is out the next 5 days, so we have pretty high confidence that by the time we go into the middle of next week, the storm's going to be somewhere around there in that circled area. The biggest question mark is what happens after that as we go towards the latter portion of next week. Here's the setup, and what we have is an area of high pressure off to the east that is going to allow for a trough of low pressure digging across the eastern half of the country, kind of carving out here a spot. And what happens with these storms is they can't go into these troughs, so they're kind of deflected by this. And what we're looking at is, as long as that trough digs in far enough to the south, this is going to be turned to the north with time. There's an opening, a weakness in the atmosphere. These storms can't run right into these ridges of high pressure, can't run into these troughs of low pressure, so they take the easiest path out, which is in between those, and that would cause this storm to turn northward, which you can see in our latest computer models here, each one of these showing that as we go out towards the end of next week, that turn to the north. Now, what we know is these models, once we get out past 5 days, have a tendency not to be incredibly reliable. So we take everything with a grain of salt. It is at least encouraging that we're seeing this in the modeling, but it is far from a guarantee. And what we'll watch throughout the weekend and into early next week is to see if any of these models trend a little bit farther west, which would cause us to watch this even closer than we already are and monitor for potential impacts. Now, as we go into this weekend, the thing about having a major hurricane, especially Category 5 strength, out in the Atlantic Ocean is the wave action is going to start to propagate out, starting to arrive perhaps down into Florida by the end of the weekend, and then along our coast from Monday into Tuesday. So high surf is going to be an increasing issue. Even if the storm stays offshore, we are likely to see some high surf at our beaches and a high risk of rip currents as well. So I'd say from Monday on next week, we're going to want to stay out of the water, out at the beaches, just play it safe as the storm hopefully passes by. You may be wondering how far or how close that would put the storm if it does pass offshore where those computer models are estimating. And this is roughly about 600 to 700 miles based on the current forecast modeling that we're seeing out there right now. Now, out ahead of this storm, this is a different look here at what we call the ocean heat content. Essentially, this measures the water temperature, but it also factors in how deep the warm water goes. So we know that the deeper the warmer water is, that's higher content for these storms to tap into. So essentially, they want the warmest, deepest water. Well, right now you can see in the red that the warmest water in the entire Atlantic Ocean resides down near Jamaica and in the Western Caribbean. But this water is plenty warm enough out ahead of it. It wouldn't be until it gets into that kind of blue shaded area farther to the north where we would likely start to see at least that very warm ocean water have less of an impact on this storm. Now, one thing we will watch, notice this blue area here with the northern part of this forecast kind of corresponding with each other, overlapping each other. What that is, this is actually some cooler water left behind by Franklin, as it was a hurricane that came right up through this area. So it's used up some of that really warm water, and it's caused some upwelling, so it's brought some cooler water to the surface. So if this storm, once it gets into a little bit more northern latitude, it may actually be impacted by previous storms in that area, which have already used up some of that warmest water. So we'll see how that all plays into things down the road. But once again, that's getting out towards the middle of next week. We are seeing some computer models that bring this, instead of close to the southeast, closer to the northeast coastline, somewhere from New England on up toward Nova Scotia. So this is a storm that we certainly aren't writing off at this point in time, but as you go into the weekend, just stay updated on things in case we start to see more of a shift in those computer models towards our coastline, less of a turn to the north. We may have to start thinking a little bit more about potential impacts here, but that is not the least likely scenario at this point in time. Don't forget, you can get updates right here, or you can get updates on anywhere you stream Live 5 News. You can do that by downloading the Live 5 First Alert weather app. We'll send you continuous updates. You can hop on in the app at any point in time over the upcoming days to get the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center, including the forecast track. I know you're busy, you're on the go, but we need to keep a watchful eye on this one, especially because of the intensity of this storm and the fact that it will be positioned in an area north and east of the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas as we go towards the middle of next week. So trust us, keep you updated as we go through the upcoming days with Hurricane Lee. By the way, Margot behind this, that's a non-issue. Don't be worried about that. It is going to stay well out to sea. That's the very latest from the Live 5 News Alert Desk. Once again, download the Live 5 First Alert weather app for constant updates as we go through the weekend ahead.